Shall I tell you something secretly, Angel? Kristian warned me for it. If my dad starts talking, he keeps on talking.
It's true.
No, but in a beautiful way. I mean, yeah.
I have people at IFC now that have become close friends, and I mean friends that we, talk to each other. And there are some where we only meet for the IFC, and yet, as soon as we get there, there is no breaking the ice or warming up. It's like we were together the whole year, and of such a large variety of people too. I mean, I'm friends with a prince from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, you mentioned, I heard it. Hey, Kristian, how are you?
Considering my father was my teacher when I was in high school, it's going to be interesting to have him as a student in one of my sessions.
So are you planning, Angel, to go to Kristian's session?
Absolutely.
Well, one down, Kristian.
I've got one attendee.
I want to have bragging rights with the rest of my friends there. And say, wasn't my son brilliant? And then see what they answer.
There you go. Narrative psychology is a field of psychology that looks at the way people make sense of the world by the stories that they create. And ultimately what the research in that field has uncovered is that every one of our experiences as we go through life, we essentially sort of create a story about, and we are continuously sort of creating a story about our lives. And so that framework I use as the underpinnings for Threadline. That is at the heart of the workshops that we'll be running, is the application of that narrative psychology framework to building brands, building nonprofit brands that create relationships with donors that last a lifetime. I'm from South Florida originally and come from a family of 2 teachers who ultimately went into nonprofit management and marketing, and obviously like father, like son, as you can see here on the call.
So, Kel, teacher, tell us all about you.
Okay, well, I was born in Cuba. I grew up in Jamaica, went to college in Canada. My dad is Cuban with a tremendous amount of ethnic and racial and mixes. And my mom was from Lebanese parents who settled in Jamaica. So I am, a tough old dog. And I use the word old more symbolically than literally. My parents wanted me to study business. I did that the first year to please them and realized I hated it. And then I went into some very useful fields, Spanish literature and drama. And I had a minor in English also, 2 majors and 1 minor. I went back to Jamaica and I taught with the Jesuits who I had been with from I was 3 years old in Cuba and then in Jamaica. And I love the Jesuits. I have a great debt for the education they gave me, because after I finished high school, I found university exceptionally easy. After teaching for 28 years, I joined Food for the Poor, which is one of the largest international charities in the US. I joined as executive vice president, and I didn't know much about fundraising, but I was brought in because of an issue with the organization that I needed to help fix. And so basically, I went from that to executive director and then executive director and chief marketing officer. I read voraciously about fundraising. When I had pretty much covered the field in fundraising, I went to sales so I could steal. One of my presentations was I can't remember the name of it now, but it's something to do with to steal is divine. So basically take what you can from the commercial world, because as Kristian knows, it costs a tremendous amount to do research, and they can afford to spend $200,000 on research and nobody criticizes, but have a nonprofit spend $10,000 on research and all the people will be going up in arms that you're wasting the donors' money to do research. We actually at Food for the Poor, for the 21 years I was there, we had the great benefit of the IFC conference, because although I attended many conferences a year, there was none that was more helpful to us in large ways than the IFC. For example, the idea of doing DRTV, it is from the IFC when the DRTV won the prize for the year for whatever they were doing. And so it took me 3 years to convince the board to do TV at Food for the Poor, because it is expensive. But you know what? It's a very successful venture. Then I heard about Spanish TV, and we went into that also and was very successful with that. Another year, in my earlier years, thank God it was my earlier years, we thought that we were being very donor-centric because at every meeting we said donor is king. And then I had Tom Ahern. I went all the way to Holland to have an American inspire me with what true donor centricity was like. I went back home and I was the final editor of anything that came out in writing at Food for the Poor. And I sent back and sent back and sent back, so they stopped talking about this organization and start talking about the donor. And our revenue increased quite well because of that, because we were basically, when I was sitting very smugly at Tom's presentation thinking, oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. Then when I went home and started reading again after Tom's presentation, I thought, oh my God, we do this. And so I started sending back everything. I told him I want the word help eliminated and so forth. And that was a huge thing that came from, the guys. And then Kristian did, what was then called an emotional inquiry study on our donor base. And we realized that the very first, and this all came again from Tom Ahern's thing, that the very first reason why the donor gives is not to help the poor. That was number 4. It was to feel good about himself. So we started then changing the language, and instead of your $44 will feed a starving child for 6 months, it was your loving, compassionate gift of $44 will save a starving child. So they became compassionate, they became loving, they became lifesavers. So it really changed our whole organization and made it much more lucrative where our mission was concerned. In every single one I attended of the IFC, I got an idea like that. Like I went home eager to do something new. Where donor centricity is concerned, our newsletters always used to do maybe a third of the net of our appeals. Well, we did a newsletter called Why You Matter, which is totally donor-based. The net on that newsletter was $1.3 million. Just to give you that, it's not just that ideas are gotten and you can discuss new ideas. These translate into dollars, and dollars translate into improved mission. So it was I would never miss an IFC. When I started going, I went 14 years in a row. When it was all in person, then the COVID came, I did virtually, and now I'm so happy to return to the in-person because I miss my friends and I miss getting a great idea that I can use. I now have a consultancy where I specialize in small, I am 72, so I could retire, but I don't want to retire. I have too much in my brain to leave it there dormant. So basically, I go to small organizations that can't afford a consultant, and I do the work for about 1/5 of the price of a regular consultant and help them out. And, and it's a great feeling. I just started this about 2 months ago, and I have 2 clients now, both very tiny organizations. They were both tabula rasa when I started. They had no clue about donor centricity, about any of the big things for fundraising. So it has been a really great experience for me and for them.
I feel humbled, in awe, and I feel a bit pressured, like I hope our program is good enough this year, although I have seen it and I think it will be really super exciting.
You can see why I decided to sponsor right off the bat. He's quite the salesman about the IFC, and he's always spoken about it in this way every time he's attended it. And of most of my family members, my father is probably in a career that's closest to mine, so we have the most to talk about professionally speaking. And so he's always telling me about the ideas that he's learned and the different behavioral economics and the psychology and the storytelling and all these things, which I have been working on in the commercial side, but not sort of really focusing on in the nonprofit side and seeing how they basically translate into each field or into each industry.
Presenters are of a very huge quality. I don't put up with bad presentations, and I've only had to walk out once in all the years going to the IFC. There is an Italian lady who started off by asking everyone for their ragu recipes, and I cannot stand icebreakers that last half an hour. So I just got up and I walked out of the room. That's the only time I've done that. The presenters, sometimes it's not that they give you new information, but they're just tremendously inspiring. I'm a big fan of Alan Clayton, for example. I am his biggest groupie. Whenever he comes to the US, I go there. Whenever I go to the IFC, I go to his presentation. He's an amazing inspiration. But after a while, you have heard some of the things before, but I still always walk out of his room walking on cloud nine, inspired by being who I am and what I'm doing, and that's important. I tend to be a storyteller by nature. He's definitely one. Kristian is definitely one. Actually, my oldest son, who's not in any of this, is also a good storyteller. So it's kind of running in the family, So basically, people like Grace, Sprinkle Grace, Sprinkle Grace. I'm going to her. She has a presentation on the first day. I am, attending to that. She is very, very good. And that's the quality of the presenters. Like, honestly, I went to a presentation in the US, and every time it ended, I had to correct many of the things that they said that were not true, because I am always conscious of the new ones who are there waiting like sponges to be educated. And then, one of the presentations said that a multi-channel donor, that's a myth, that they're better than a single channel donor. Now, I have proven that many times that is incorrect, that a multi-channel donor has always been a stronger donor than a single channel for obvious reasons. I mean, they're much more in contact with the organization, much more a friend of the organization. And so I had to get up at the end and say, well, where do you get this from? And then when they were explaining their figures, their statistics, I said, well, this one is wrong. That's not a correct statistic. And because I feel so bad for the new ones who might leave there thinking, oh yeah, let's forget about multi-channel and do, single channel. And that happened in almost every single one I went to. When I go to the IFC, I go as a student and I learn tremendously. And what I've heard before, I accept it, and it kind of refreshes my mind on it. And what is new, I always cherish it, because it's the only conference that I go to that I really always leave with something new. And that's after 21 years in the nonprofit arena.
That's absolutely stunning. And I also like what you're saying about sometimes you also need a confirmation, and it's also nice that you get confirmed about certain things like, hey, we do this right. But yeah, getting the new ideas. And I think what I like about your story is turning it into action as well, is beautiful. Kristian, well, what are your expectations about IFC?
I've not attended, so I've only heard about the experiences, and I've attended other conferences in the U.S. with my father, nonprofit conferences and things like that. And the thing that I think I'm excited about with the IFC, just even from a partner's perspective, and seeing the way that's being managed and the way that sort of I'm experiencing that, is oftentimes in conferences in general, and especially in the US when we attend, sessions tend to become sales pitches. And I find you can sometimes get some really interesting nuggets out of that, but oftentimes it just feels off. It feels one-sided, or it feels biased and things like that. And that's what was interesting about when signing up for the IFC, is you can't buy a speaking spot, right? You can't sort of get in there. And even as a sponsor or as a partner, right, the expectation, my father has told me about the ratings that they give after each program and things like that. You are expected not to sell, right? It is meant to be an educational session. And for me, that's actually really exciting, because one, I hate sales as like a traditional sort of, I hate getting up and trying to get someone to buy my service or anything like that. What, as for my organization, and what I've sort of been most excited about, is just providing as much value as possible. And so I try to avoid, sometimes I probably undersell what we do, because I really just want to get up and sort of, like my father did for many years, just teach, right? And just share what I know, and share those ideas, and share those case studies and things like that. And so I'm excited that that has sort of been an emphasis at the IFC, and I'm excied that when, even as partners, we are excited to attend sessions as well, and I'll be bringing my colleague as well. What my father has sort of emphasized about the conference, and you all have sort of emphasized as well, is it's as much a conference as it is a community in regards to the way that you're designing it. I hesitated to say network. It's as much a conference as it is networking, because networking always has a little bit of a weird vibe to it as well. I also don't care for networking personally, right? I don't like the wine. I typically only eat the cheese, and then I just am stuck in the corner while everyone else is sort of talking to each other. But it is sort of fully designed. The days are sort of fully planned. It's not just 9 to 5, and then there are events off site somewhere that you can go do something or anything like that. And there's these sort of planned experiences and parties and things like that, where it really does feel like you have created this maybe sort of temporary bubble of these nonprofit individuals who are sort of leaving the world of their day-to-day job in order to sort of immerse themselves among others who also want to be immersed in these new ideas and in these principles and things like that. So that to me is really exciting, and I'm really sort of interested to see it. And I'm also just especially excited to hear from these international audiences and sort of meet from these, you know, in the US, you typically hear largely US perspectives. I'm really interested to sort of see that as well, and to see the diversity of that community at the session, and sort of get exposed to and connected with and sort of start to build out some relationships with those individuals.
There is a wonderful thing that happens at the IFC. Usually it's between 60 to 70 countries represented at the IFC. And, you know, sometimes you hear something and you think to yourself, nah, that won't work for us. And then you start thinking, but maybe if I tweak this and tweak that, maybe it could work for us. And we get to know each other. I have friends that have no quotation marks around them. I have friends at the IFC that actually some have called me already saying, are you coming? And I said, yes. Oh, great, we can talk again. You know, and it's nice because the networking with 63 different countries, it's so wonderfully enlightening. You know, you also feel in India, for example, you know, I was talking to this gentleman from India, and he said that when they do monthly giving, it's a bicycle that they use through the Indian streets to go collect a monthly thing. And you think, oh my God, we have it so easy. And you start feeling better about what you do have and thinking, you know what? We're pretty lucky. We shouldn't be complaining. And I say that at all. Whenever I present, I said, you know, for everything that happens that is bad for the sector, something happens to balance it out, to counterbalance, whether it be machine learning or whether it be better statistics, whether it be new systems. You know, there's always something, and we have to be resilient if we are going to make the world a better place. And I love the fact that the strategic partners become part of our mission and help us to fulfill our mission. So it isn't the light, the light of the side of light and the side of darkness. It's not at all. And whenever I speak, I always consider the strategic partners part of our mission. And here it's a beautiful combination of both. There is none of that kind of prejudice of, well, you just want to make a buck. You know, it's really people who are interested in saving the world, and that's not easy to find all the time.
For people that not have been, it is that bubble, and sometimes I describe it as almost that festival feeling. You know, you're 3 days with each other, and you're all like-minded because you're on a mission to make the world a better place. So, and there, you know, not for profit and for profit is actually mingling very much with each other as well, to see how we can support each other. You know, who is the best practice that others can learn from and immediately improve? How does it work? What can we do together? How can we collaborate? And especially that collaboration part, we want to focus a lot upon this year. Because of course, one of the things that we realized after the pandemic is, yes, we are raising funds. It's challenging, but we have been absolutely pushed back if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, etc. So that kind of impact creation, we need to do more there. And if we can there work more closely together with each other, learn from each other, but also maybe explore certain challenges that we can solve together, that would be ideal. And if IFC can be a starting point, not only an end point, but a starting point, and then to continue afterwards, I would love to see that. And that would be amazing.
After the last 2 years and the shift in social values and things like that we're seeing, and the different realizations and the epiphanies that I think different organizations have been having, both on the nonprofit side and on the for-profit side, on the commercial side, I think what's interesting is actually the opportunity for the nonprofit industry to actually set some of the model that the for-profit industry can learn from. I think a lot of times we think, you know, like my father said, the commercial companies have so much money, and so they are so much more innovative, and they can experiment so much more, and they can try all these new technologies. And so a lot of things often feel like they trickle down to other industries from some of those spaces. But I think like now we're seeing like Threadline, my company is going through the process of becoming a benefit corporation. And in the US, and I think actually globally, there's a certification organization called B Corp. And the application to get a B Corp certification through them used to be about 6 months. And they actually told us now that because of the increase in organizations, for-profit organizations that want to become more social impact oriented, that wait time is now 12 months, right? It has doubled because of the number of applications that they've received over the last 2 years. It just really kind of truly exploded. And so I think, to your point, I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunity. And I think a lot of, I think unfortunately, and perhaps it's because of the humility that's sort of inherent in folks who go into nonprofit, who are doing work that often is self-sacrificing and important and oftentimes ignored and oftentimes underfunded and things like that, that they don't realize actually how innovative the nonprofit industry really is and how advanced it is and how much we can learn from what the nonprofit space does. And in all of the marketing work that I do, I often tell folks the perhaps biggest challenge in marketing is in nonprofit, because in a traditional business, the companies that we consult for, a customer will give them money and they will give them something, right? They will pay them, they will give them some product or some service or whatever it might be. But in a nonprofit space, you are asking a donor for money and they don't get any tangible thing in response, right? And so you really have to focus on the relationship and on that sort of emotional reward and on, of course, the dedication to the mission and making sure that you are sort of solving that problem or resolving that issue or sort of overcoming that challenge. But that's a much more complicated marketing challenge, a complicated relational challenge with customers who don't get any sort of truly physical thing back for what they give you. So I think there's some really interesting sort of opportunities there. And for me, it's become this kind of pattern of part of what I've loved doing so far, having with my academic work, is bringing academic ideas into the commercial world, because there was oftentimes that sort of iron curtain between the two. The academics never wanted to share with the business folks, and the business folks thought the academics were just always too much in their white towers. And when you finally start to break those bridges, you start to see a lot of really great things happen. And I think the same thing is happening now from the academic and the commercial world into the nonprofit world, is that there is often that iron curtain in which, the nonprofits think the commercial folks are just so greedy, and the commercial folks think the nonprofit folks are just sort of, tree huggers or whatever it might be. And they don't think that they really can communicate, but they actually do have so much in common and they have so much that they can learn from each other. And so I think your point of that sort of collaborative spirit, I think, is really critical across. I think, it's going to be exciting to see that across different nonprofit organizations, but also between nonprofit organizations and partners. And even what I'm excited about is between partners, right? I hate thinking of competitors as competitors, right? I think anyone that's out there that's doing something similar to me, they're a potential collaborator, right? They're someone I can bounce ideas off of. They're someone I can learn from. And I think that's where, I think the space moves forward and the space really starts to make advances that hopefully leapfrog and catch up after the last couple of years to where it needs to be.
We are a society of change makers. We are a society of people who want to make the world a better place. So if something works for me, when I present, I throw the baby out with the bathwater. Whatever works for me could work for someone else. And I have learned so much from other people who do that. For example, I always knew that you had to know your donor. What I didn't know until I heard it from another presenter was that you have to let the donor know you know them. It's not enough to know them. You have to let them know you know them, because that's what makes them feel good about themselves. We send 27 pieces of mail at Food for the Poor every year. And I know I used to get a gasp whenever I mentioned that in Europe, because that's outrageous for Europe. But we took out the second piece that was the weakest of each month. And we sent the donor a letter saying, 12 years ago on this month, you did a wonderful thing. You gave your first donation to Food for the Poor to help starving children. That piece always beat the piece we had before, because the donor didn't even remember when he started. All of a sudden he's saying, oh my God, I didn't know that, but he knows that I started in that month. And of course, they don't realize that it's all from computerized stuff, but, they feel known. It's the same thing with saying, well, we give our donors the great feeling of doing good. That's not enough. You have to give them something more than just that. because as Kristian said, when you buy something, you get something, and you feel it is equal to what you have given. When a donor is giving you money and they get that good feeling between 3 to 5 days, they have the afterglow, which is why Food for the Poor makes their thank yous go out like the day after the donation is received. Doesn't matter so much what you say in it, it's the timing. And we make over 10% of our income from thank yous because we catch them in that afterglow. But basically, when they give you that, they want to get something else besides just that good feeling. They don't think of that logically. So in Christian organizations, they should be praying with them. We did that for COVID and it worked fantastically. We offered prayer, and so forth, and they could call and we would pray with them. But every single organization has something they can give to them.
For me, it has a lot to do with honesty and the truth as well. Do we want somebody's money, or do we really want somebody following our mission, the broader partnership that is creating that long-term partnership? Kristian, you and I spoke about it also from a sponsorship perspective. Yes, I know you will see an audience that might be interesting for you at IFC, but for us, it's much more important to say, what is it what you want to achieve, your wider, broader mission behind it, and where are we going as Resource Alliance, and how can we work together there, and what can we do together? And for me, that is much more important than, the one-off sponsorship. And by being open and outspoken about it, you create already that bonding because you feel, oh, we are on the same mission here, and that's what let's explore that, how we can collaborate and what that means and how we can dive deeper, further, etc. So I think that interaction is absolutely crucial on every level. And I agree, Angel, we still do it not enough. Also, when I look at my organization, what I work for, but in general, I think within the sector, we do not do it enough yet. And I really hope that we can change that towards, more within the sector, within our donors, beyond the sector, be that open space to collaborate. And secretly, but I'm also a little bit of an idealist. I really believe also after the pandemic that solidarity part is so big at the moment, and people want to, create a more beautiful world in whatever way that will look like, etc. And I think that's really crucial. So,
Alan Clayton always says that whenever there is a crisis, people need to give. It's not that they may want to, they need to give during a crisis so as to feel better about themselves and about what's happening, because it is a positive thing. It's strange because one of the things I stole from the commercial world, from research they had done, is that companies that have the trust of their people do 82% better than those that are not trusted. And so we have to work a lot to gain that trust. We have to do what we say we do. The people loved the housing because we sent them a folder that had pictures of the families who are going to live in the house, a certificate thanking the donor for his generosity, and and another thing on the other side, I can't remember what, but they felt we were saying we were going to do it, and we proved that we did it, which is trust. And that's why young people, they're talking about millennials don't trust programmatic giving. They don't want to give monthly for food that they never see what it is. And that's part of it. They want to see the red thermometer, if you need an ambulance for this hospital, and then they all donate and give and stuff. And when that thermometer, they have a real happy feeling about themselves. And that's how they give, So it's all trust. It's based on so much trust. And that's something that I really feel a lot. I hate when I go to a presentation in the US and they say, well, we do this, but it's proprietary information. We should not have proprietary information in the nonprofit. And I hate the term nonprofit. I feel we should change it to profit for good, because it sounds like we can't make a profit when we have a business. We do have, there is a mission part of it and there's a corporate part of it. And the corporate part of it is making a profit for the mission. And I don't know, well, let me get off my soapbox. That's neither here nor there. But, that I feel trust is so important that we have to develop, the means in which we can gain that trust.
It is, I've got actually two questions, but they could be maybe brief. Imagine it is the Friday afternoon. and everyone is leaving IFC. What is your sense of this was really great? Could you describe it?
I mean, that's a relatively easy one for me. I mean, IFC itself doesn't have to do too much because I'm going to be spending a few days with my father, so that's already a bonus in regards to being in Amsterdam. But what I'm hoping is I walk away with really just sort of, I think like my father said, a number of friends, and maybe they're still quote friends at that point, but a number of folks that I feel like I have a shared set of values with, and we had a connection intellectually or personally or emotionally, or we were sort of debating ideas and kind of exploring different topics, and that I walked away, I think also like my father said, feeling somewhat inspired, right? And I'm not technically in the nonprofit space, right? I don't run a nonprofit organization, but I think, you know, being around this kind of community is an inspiring thing. And, you know, as someone who is running a for-profit organization that is serving nonprofit communities, part of the reason we want to serve nonprofit organizations is because we think they are extremely important to the world, right? And what they do and the things that they accomplish and the roles that they play in you know, societies all over the world, that to me is inspiring. So getting to see and hear from those organizations and to be inspired in those ways, that to me is going to be a successful outcome to all of this. I never go to a conference, and I don't expect this one to be where I walk away thinking I've gotten 5 clients or anything like that. Conferences don't create clients. Conferences create relationships, and potentially relationships become clients. And so that's what I'm hoping for is to build a number of relationships coming out of that.
Angel?
I was waiting to be asked.
I'm curious to your answer.
Actually, we never left the IFC. What we did when the conference was over, about 8 of us who are in the nonprofit space and the profit for good space, we got together and talked about any of the great ideas we got, because you can't get to all of the presentations. So there, if someone got a great idea from that presentation, they would explain it, I would explain it, the others would explain it. So we had this little meeting of minds there where we were trying to get all full benefit of the entire conference. Also, you know, that evening in Amsterdam, sometimes we met, you know, because there were so many people and they're so friendly. I mean, I would hear people speaking Spanish, a group speaking Spanish, usually with dial-up, and I would stop and recite some poetry for them in Spanish, having been a literature teacher who loved poetry. So, you know, it became a very at-home type of atmosphere away. It was the first time in ages that I got to read a book for pleasure. You know, after everything was done at 12 at night or midnight or whatever, you know, I went up to my room and I read for pleasure, which is something I never got to do at home because I was sending out emails till 11:30 at night. But I want to leave with something that I know will help our sector to thrive. And particularly in my role now as consultant, which I, you know, before it wasn't for the nonprofit, and I know the importance of it, the importance of one little thing can make, one photograph, one whatever. And I want to go back with new ideas, newly inspired, so I can talk to my customers and my future customers in a better way about how to be successful.
If you have to describe IFC to somebody who has never been, in a one-liner, what would it be?
I can't speak in one-liners.
I love you. This is so beautiful. And fair enough. Yeah.
I would describe the IFC as something that is almost indescribable and that they would have regretted the rest of their lives not attending.
No, that's a beautiful one-liner.
For me, from what I've learned about it, what I've learned from my father, what I've read on the website, things like that, it is sort of the conference for kind of the global nonprofit audience, right? I mean, and that's strategically for my company why we wanted to attend. And you know, when we were looking at how we expand our presence and our sort of our name within the nonprofit industry. It didn't feel like there was any other choice besides this one, and that was based on sort of hearing again everything that my father would say about it, the organizations he would say attended, the ideas that he would say were presented there, the caliber of those ideas, the caliber of those presenters, that sort of thing. So that's what it was to me. That's what sort of drew me in the most overall when we were making our decision about conferences to attend. And this is, I believe, the only nonprofit one that we did plan to attend this year. And I can't think of any others that would have been as worth it as far as our investment is concerned. And then I'm just really excited to sort of, this is going to sound, I don't need to flatter my father, but I am excited to attend because it's going to be sort of an exciting thing to sort of see, as I don't get to see my father very often in a work mode, right? In sort of within a professional community. Every now and then I have, and this community that he has described, outside of the sort of community he built at Food for the Poor and the relationships that he had there, this one felt like a much broader sort of diverse community of individuals that he's built these relationships with, and that every now and then he mentions, or they're part of some story, or they're part of some sort of idea that he talks about, and he mentions, like I think it was Alan, and all these different individuals that he just knows and he hears. So I'm excited to sort of see that community almost from like a third part, like almost like an outsider's perspective, and sort of watch that community kind of come together with him part of it, and sort of see that kind of thrive, and see where he fits in and where others fit in, and how those conversations are going. Because as he mentioned at the beginning of the call, we are a Caribbean, Arabic, loud, talkative family, and I imagine if my father is in a community, it is a talkative community. It is not a quiet, somber sort of community. And so I'm excited to sort of just see and kind of get swept up into that as well at the conference. And we don't cross paths very often in our work, so it's exciting to cross paths in this way as well.
A real pleasure meeting you, Angel. Very nice seeing you again, Kristian.
Same here.
Can't wait to see you in October.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.